There's been so much lately talking about the difficulties that boys are having, and you can look on the internet and find just reams and reams of statistics. You can go into any bookstore and find, if you look through the parenting shelves, find all of these books about the difficulties that boys are having. And what's really going on, I think, is that we haven't, as a culture, learned to make transition. We haven't taught boys how to make the transition from boyhood into adulthood. And the thing that we see in our culture that's actually being celebrated now, a friend of mine calls the Peter Pan syndrome, where you have these 30, 40-year-old men who are basically still adolescents. And if you look in the beer commercials and the movies, these people are now celebrated, where it used to be an embarrassment if someone didn't become a responsible part of society. Now they're celebrated as an ideal that we can aspire to, that we can live without any kind of responsibility in our lives. And we have to ask ourselves, well, why is it happening? What is it that we're not doing, or what is it that we are doing that is celebrating adolescence instead of celebrating wisdom? When a child's born, he's really given heredity. He's given a physical body through his parents. He's given a way of being that the family has developed over time. And this is kind of what he inherits from the family. But what that boy needs to do then is to find his future. The other half is what's unique about him. Who is he as an individual? And so he has to seek this and bring these two things together. And that's the challenge of adolescence. For the people who are watching this struggle, it's a time of real terror. If you look at what goes on in our society right now, boys succumb to drug addiction, they die in car accidents or mangled in car accidents, they commit suicide, they end up in drug violence or gang violence. I mean, there are all these things that we watch as these teens experience this transition. What's missing for us now is the guidance. There used to be these circle of elders that would say, okay, you're having these experiences, this is what they mean. Joseph Campbell was a comparative mythologist who went all over the world studying these different stages of transition and the rituals that take place during the adolescent years. And he really defined some very clear-cut stages. The first one is separation. The boy had to leave the village. This is really symbolic of leaving the mother, that it's time now to step out and be independent. In many cultures, a circle of elders come and they take the boy away. Literally kidnap them in a lot of cases, and the mother's screaming and wailing and holding onto his legs and begging not to take him away, though she knows that he needs to go. And so the circle of elders create this separation. Then they take them to a sacred place, a place that's been prepared through meditation and prayer, and it's unique. It's not a place that they go to in other times. It's just for this purpose. And once there, they take the boys through a rites of passage, this incredible, intense experience that's really designed to drive them into a state of internal chaos. Some of the cultures do these very intense things. The Iroquois actually drove staves through the boys' pectoral muscles and hung them from the ceiling and spun them around until they passed out. These boys were really experiencing death, because part of what's happening in this rites of passage and what has to happen in all transitions is that something has to die for something else to be born. And then most cultures have a type of a vision quest. In the Iroquois, they would take the boys and they would put them up in a tree, and they would have to stay there 3, 4, 5 days until they had a vision. And then they would come down. And if they came down before they had a vision, they went back to the mother and they got to come and try it again the next year. They weren't ready. But when they had this vision, that was when the circle of elders sat down with them and helped them interpret, what was your dream? What was your vision? What did it mean? What does it mean that's unique to you? And in this way, the boys were able to find for themselves, what is it that I'm supposed to contribute to my society? What is it that I can give that's unique? These archetypal impulses for transition and for initiation, these are actually something that we carry deep in our psyche. They're part of our consciousness. And that if they're not recognized and celebrated in the community, that they have to come out somehow. And you can see the echoes of these archetypal impulses, these impulses of initiation. You can see them in the teenagers today. Anyone who's spent time with teenagers, one of the first things that starts to happen is this withdrawal. You know, close the door, do not enter, death to all who cross this threshold, whatever it is. There's this moment where they just pull in and say, I want to be separate. I don't want to be part of you anymore. I'm something different. And so that's the separation stage. For some boys, you know, it has to be some kind of a really brutal experience of, you know, running away from home, or, you know, it could be any number of things, but a very intense experience of seeking their selves, you know, who am I? So the issue is that all of these experiences are taking them away, but what we don't have anymore is the experience of bringing them back. We don't have that helping them interpret their experience. This is where the circle of elders is missing. That group that has experienced things before, that can give them some perspective about what's going on in themselves. And this is the role that men really have to step into now for these boys as they go into this transition. The first thing that we have to think about is, how do we develop relationships with them? I think the ideal time to start with working with boys is around age 12, when they start to hit puberty and they start to look out into the world, yet the cat's not out of the bag yet. They haven't started doing drugs, they haven't started having sex. I mean, sure, that happens with some kids at 12 years old, but for a majority of them, it's not quite happening yet. So we have to get in then. As they start to look out, they have to see that there are some men in their lives that can give them some of the answers, some of the information that they need. And a great place to start is developing of practical skills. You know, how do you take care of your finances? How do you take care of your house? How do you take care of your health? How do you cook? How do you take care of your car? How do you change your tire? How do you change the oil? How do you change the brakes? You know, things that give them confidence that they can do things in the world. When there are things to do in the house, you know, they can say, oh, I can do that. I can paint that wall. I know how to do that. I know how to replace sheetrock. I can do that. I can change the oil in your car. You know, and they start to feel, hey, I can contribute. I have skills that are going to help me be productive in the world and be helpful. The next thing is service. That, you know, this circle of elders, these men can gather around the boys and say, we're going to be of service to our community. And they can find something that really meets the age of the children. You know, with 12-year-olds, it's maybe going out and doing trail building or cleaning up a creek, you know, doing real kind of physical things. But as they get older, more relational things that have to do with helping other human beings. So that service work can start to grow. And when they see these men whom they respect, you know, they've watched them teach them practical skills, they say, wow, you know, that guy, I didn't know he could do that. Maybe, you know, subconsciously they're saying, maybe he can teach me other things too. And so when they see these men who they're growing to respect saying, hey, this is something we can do, we can go out in the community and make a difference, at first they're going to be reluctant. Every teenager in the world would rather just stay home and, you know, be indulgent of themselves. But once they get out and do service work, it's impossible to do service work and not feel good about it. Most kids, once they've done some service work, they're the ones who come to us and say, hey, when are we going back to do whatever? So that's the second thing that we do. The third is the outdoors. The outdoors has always been the key tool in these transitions, in these rites of passage experiences, because there's no negotiating with the outdoors. You can't manipulate a mountain. You can't convince the rain to stop. You can't convince it to be hotter or colder or any of that. You have to deal with it as it is. And so this is one of the lessons that boys need to learn. They need to learn that, hey, some things just are, and we have to deal with it. So inherent in doing these three things, the practical skills, the service work, and the outdoor, is the development of relationship. That it's in those moments when, you know, you've painted the wall and you're sitting down eating lunch, you start to have just informal conversation. You've hiked all day long, now you're sitting around after dinner and you're talking. But this is where, as the relationship between the men and the boys grows, then they can start to talk about, what does it mean to be a man? What are the things that we're told we should be as men that we really shouldn't be paying attention to? And what are the things that we should be paying attention to? You know, what does it mean to be reliable, to be honest? You know, these values, and really these things need to come out of the men who are in their lives. Someone like me can come and give you a list of things, you know, you need to tell them this and this and this and this and this, but really it's not authentic unless it comes from the men who are there in their lives anyway. And so this is kind of a 3-year process going through this. And at the end of the 3 years, they've hit about 15 years old. The men say, now we're going to take them through a very intense rites of passage experience. And so we're going to take them out into the woods, and for, you know, 5 days, 7 days, whatever it is, we're going to do things to really challenge them physically, emotionally, psychologically. And because they've been spending all this time with the boys, they know what it is that those specific boys need. The program that I started, Sakonnet Passage, is built on this. And the reason that I built it this way is because they're incredible programs for rites of passage, you know, Outward Bound and Croca and Vision Quests and things like this. And they're really spectacular programs, and the work that these people are doing is incredible. But what I saw was missing was that these boys go and have these experiences, they come back to a community where their friends haven't had those experiences. Maybe a couple of them did, but not all of them. Their parents really haven't had that experience. They don't, you know, and so they kind of go back, and these rites of passage just become a memory. And the circle of elders isn't there in their community anymore. It used to be they came back to the village. These circles of elders were there when they were deciding to get married, when they were going to have children, when they're, you know, whatever it is, their children are sick, their wife is arguing with them, whatever. You know, these men were there in their lives. And so that, I think, is the difference in what we need today. It's not just the rites of passage, but it's having that intense experience that that circle of elders is there also. Our boys need us to be the ones to step up and do it. They need to see us reaching into ourselves and trying to change and learn and strive to bring these things. Because that's going to mean a lot more to them. It's going to be a lot more genuine and a lot more authentic if it comes from men they already know. I think that these archetypal impulses that live in the teens, they're also within us to be the circle of elders. We just have to trust that they're there. We have to have faith to take that step, that we can relearn it, we can rediscover that role. And I think most men know that they can do it on some level, but they're afraid to take that step. And part of it is there's been this incredible gap because there's been no ritual. The gap between young and old, it's, you know, the older people, the elders, and, you know, to a teenager, anybody over 27 is an elder. You know, if you're 30, 35, you're really old, right? So, you know, these elders look back and I don't know what to tell them, you know, I don't know what to do, you know, and so they say, I'm just gonna, you know, I can't go there. But we have to have the courage to step into that void and reach out to the boys, because they're looking to us. They're looking for role models, and they're looking for us to step up and say, hey, I'm going to help you. So my question is, and my hope is, why don't we step up and do this beforehand? You know, go into this knowing that we're going to have to spend time. Why not prepare properly? Why not go into an experience and make it something positive? We can have a plan. We can get these boys through this in a way that, no, it doesn't guarantee that it's going to keep them out of, you know, off of drugs and be ultimately successful, but it's certainly better than just rolling the dice and hoping that they fall in with good friends and don't end up with drug and alcohol problems and things like that. We can do this. I had an incredible experience years back of a Cherokee elder coming to a class trip. We were out camping in the mountains of North Carolina, and she came and told stories and sang songs, and just this amazing 85-year-old woman. And when it was over, I went to her and I said, you know, I don't know how to thank you enough. You know, this has just been more than I could have ever hoped. And she said, oh, you know, In the Cherokee, we believe it's much more important to spend time with children, because children are the future. And she said, it's a beautiful thing, she said, we believe that you never know where an arrow's going to land, but if you take time to aim it carefully, you have a much better chance of it hitting its mark. And that, I think, is the picture of what we can do with these boys. If we take our time to aim them in a direction and give them the guidance that they need, there's a much better chance that they're going to go through this transition in a healthy way. And ultimately, once they've been through that transition, then the other transitions in life that come, they have a pattern that they're familiar with. They know it's going to be chaotic. They know it's going to be difficult. They know they have to let something die for something new to come. But they know they can do it, and there's a confidence in them from having gone through it once successfully, that they can now take any transition and go through it successfully.